tradition. And first, I want to talk a little bit about the pre-Christian roots of Gnosticism and Christianity in general. And so I'd like to bring in a few keynotes of Stefan's talk about this, in that in the dawn, from the misty dawn of creation and human beings, there have always been those individuals who strive for something more, that felt that there was something more. And so we get what Stefan called the super shamans, who kind of went out in the spirit and explored all these realms, and then came back with sort of techniques of the technology of the sacred to help others also have those experiences. And so that's really the background of all of the pre-Christian sacramental traditions have. So there have been 5 sacred rites actions that go way back: purification by water, anointing with oil, Thanksgiving offering, usually bread and wine, or corn mash distillate and corn, and sometimes the pollen from the corn, particularly in the Americas. And then also the imposition of hands and the Holy Union, the hierostomos.
I don't know that one.
That's Greek for the high Holy Union.
Are we talking Tantra or?
We're talking in this case, in the early rites, sometimes there was kind of a tantric union, but not in a very spiritual sense. It's as if the god and goddess were coming together to bless the crops or whatever. Yeah. So that goes way back. And then in the Egyptian mysteries, we have baptism in the mysteries of Isis at Sais, and anointing of the pharaoh, sacred bread symbolic of Osiris. Often would go about with a procession with either a loaf of bread or grain, symbolizing Osiris, and also the imposition of hands and the passing of the Ka, which was kind of the hereditary passing of the energy to the next spirit. And then in Judaic traditions, we have anointing of kings and guests. There's some references to that in some of the Gospels. And offering of bread and wine, there's a reference to that with Melchizedek. Imposition of hands with the blessing of Jacob. And baptismal sects, the Essenes, John the Baptist, and the Mandeans. Now, the Mandeans were a Gnostic group that started pretty early during the time of the Essenes. And their main sacrament is baptism. And they have baptism for marriage, baptism for birth, baptism for this, baptism for that. But they also had a system of kind of seals that they would present to the initiate, and the ways of passing up through the rulers and stuff. That was mostly for the priesthood in that religion.
Did you say John the Baptist was an Essene?
John the Baptist was there were many sects of Judaism. The Essenes is probably one that was very influential. John the Baptist was of a sect called the therapeutes, which means the healers, and so that's where he came from. But he was also
Therapeutes?
therapeutes, yeah.
Like therapeutic?
Yeah, from the same, it's from that root. Uh-huh. And so John the Baptist was from that sect and was a forerunner of Jesus, supposedly. Now the Mandeans have John the Baptist as their main savior figure and consider Jesus to be an imposter.
Right.
Imposter.
The Gospels get into that a little bit too, and
Yeah.
it's like, no, it's not me, guys, it's Jesus.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So there was a little bit of uh, the disagreement there. But anyway, there's still, we have a Mandean Vespers, and we have readings from their writings in our lectionary. So they're very, very Gnostic and a very essential part of our tradition. And then we had the early mystery religions, bread and wine usually, sacred meal and Mithraism and others, baptism, water, and hierostomos as well. And then we get the first Gnostic movement with Alexandrian Gnosticism here. So it's kind of a fusion of this Greco-Egyptian stream coming in through here. And Alexandria was kind of a melting pot of esoteric Jews. They say at this particular time in history, there are more Jews in Alexandria than there were in Jerusalem. So that gives you an idea. And they tended to be the more esoteric, Essene, Kabbalistic. Now, I won't go into the Essenes. There's a lot of the current that came in here from the Essenes. There was almost kind of a repudiation of the Essenes as far as their take on women and other things like that. The Essenes were mostly men and very ascetic, and women were just not, didn't have a high place in their consciousness. But you can see that Jesus sort of overturned all that kind of thinking, and so that's where the Alexandrian sort of melting pot. And from out of that came the Hermetic stream, which was kind of the non-Christian Gnosticism of the time. And then the Gnostic was the Christian. But you can see in a lot of particularly the Sethian Gnostic literature, like the Apocalypse of Apocryphon of John, Secret Book of John, and Hypostasis of the Archons, and Hypostasis of the Archons, and various ways to pronounce that. And that they drew a lot from the Judaic scriptures, particularly Genesis, but they kind of turned it over, turned it on its head, because Eve is the savior of Adam in those stories, and the God of the Old Testament is the demiurge, the fool, the blind god, the child tyrant.
It's an easy interpretation, though. You read the Old Testament, you're like, what did you do?
Yeah. But anyway, so obviously there was a Judaic stream in here, an esoteric, and those kinds of questions about the Old Testament God were even in some of the Kabbalistic literature, Gnostic literature. I mean, one of the statements that I ran across was, in the Genesis story, Adam covers himself with fig leaf or what covers his nakedness, and and God says, "Where are you, Adam?" And of course, the question is, well, if this was really God, wouldn't he know where Adam is?
Oh, it's not like that. Why is he playing
So,
games?
these were some of the early questions about the book of Genesis, but definitely they worked with that. And and then classical Gnosticism I see as kind of a revivification of the mystery tradition. And in the early mystery traditions, like the Eleusinian mysteries, they were very secret. Like you weren't supposed, if you told people outside who weren't initiates about anything about it, they would kill you, basically. It was very secret. And so what's different about Gnostic Christianity as far as the mystery tradition is that it was public, became more public. Now, to a degree, you'll see when I discuss the Eucharist that there are actually two parts. There's kind of the liturgy of the word, and liturgy means the work of the people, the actions of the people, and that's at the beginning. And then at the point of the act of gnosis, those that weren't initiated had not received baptism and confirmation would leave, and then would be the secret part of the ritual. But
Wasn't that one of
that's how it was done historically.
Irenaeus's critiques? Was that the Gnostics were too secretive?
Yes. Well, I mean this was true of mainstream Christianity at that time. That was how they all operated.
Only few people can read.
Yeah, exactly. So, but anyway, it was somewhat of a change. But the liturgy of the word was more akin to the synagogue service and Judaism, and then the temple sacrifice would be the canon of the mass that's following that. So you can definitely see that there's this sort of background that comes forward, and I'm hoping to convey that these things are sort of evolved in a kind of a almost organic way in that fashion. So all of that we're doing is built upon all these things that happened before. It just didn't come out of oh well, let's do it this way,
I have a question about this too. Wait.
And the Gospel of Philip, the Lord did everything in a mystery: a baptism, a chrism, a Eucharist, a redemption, and a bride chain. And then there's also in the Gospel of Philip evidence of 2 or 3 more to give us our sacred 7. And the sacramental kiss, for it is by a kiss that the perfect conceive and give birth. For this reason, we also kiss one another. We receive conception from the grace which is in each other. So this is kind of the passing of the peace that we have in the Mass.
Okay.
It's related to that. The peace of the Lord be always with you and with thy Holy Spirit.
Did it just seem to equate kiss to sex?
It is, but it's like it's the mystic kiss. There's
Just the way that it said the kiss through which something is born.
exactly that the perfect conceive and give birth. So so it's not the common not the common kiss in that regard. Okay. And there's a line also in the Gospel of Philip that says, let's see if I can recall exactly. the one whom they call barren is the mother of the angels, and the consort of Christ is Mary Magdalene. He kissed her upon the mouth of,
She was fair,
or
or at least he was, one of them was. Sorry.
oh,
I
that's,
didn't
that's,
realize
that's
you
the
didn't-
poetry of it,
Okay.
yeah. There's no record that Mary Magdalene, well, there's
There's
some,
some traditions that
there's,
say they.
there's
did-
some sacred blood, sacred
Yeah, they snuck off to France. Yeah.
holy grails, something,
But if she was a
about-
prostitute beforehand and didn't.
It wasn't,
Yeah,
that's just.
didn't
local.
pass the scopes.
Okay. Yeah, she was an old woman.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's some evidence that Mary Magdalene was an older woman that supported Jesus. And there's also accounts that she was the wife of Jesus, and a fragment, lost fragment from the Gospel of Judas, who definitely refers to her as his wife. So there's all that to think about, definitely. Anyway, and then holy orders or apostolic succession, for the Father anointed the Son anointed the apostles, and the apostles anointed us. So that's. And then there's the extreme unction or last rites. And a little bit from the Gospel of Philip. While we are in this world, it is fitting for us to acquire the resurrection for ourselves, so that when we strip off the flesh, may be found in rest, not in the midst. And the Valentinian tradition, which we most closely resemble, died out as a practice religion about 400 CE. And this was, it was violently suppressed by the mainstream church. Their writings were destroyed or hidden. The message of Christian Gnostics was obliterated for centuries. So the outer form of the sacramental practice survived to some extent in the sacraments of the mainstream Catholic Church and later Orthodox Church. Except for polemics of the Church Fathers, the Gnostic writings remained buried until the 19th century with the Bruce and Askew codices, the Oxyrhynchus papyri, and in the 20th century with Nag Hammadi. So this is, so we can see that what we know about the Valentinians was preserved in these texts. So the revival of Gnosticism really has a lot to do with the literary tradition that survived. But it's kind of like if you kind of see the mythic and pre-Christian background of the Roman Catholic, if you see the mystery and magic in the Roman Catholic rituals, particularly as they were done earlier, and you just strip away the dogmatic, sin and hellfire kind of polemics about everything, then you can see that there's something there we could work with if we approach it with a Gnostic intent. And so that's how that stream went. And then the next one is the Manichaean, which is very important. We have a lot of writings. Mani, almost all of our collects are from the writings of Mani. Several readings. And the most beautiful translation of his writings that I've ever seen is the Gospel of Mani by Duncan Greenleaf. And even his commentaries on Mani's writings are so beautiful that they bring tears to your eyes. It's just amazing. Duncan Greenleaf. It's UNKAN, Duncan. And then green leaves is like green,
Mhm.
the color green, and then leaves, Lees. Yeah, yeah, yeah. But anyway, you can see where it comes down. So he grew up in kind of where the Zoroastrians were kind of the main religion of that Persia. That's where he was. But there were a lot of sort of um, sort of baptismal sects of Judaism, but Syrian.
Mhm.
So Syrian, so would have been like what was it? There's a story about the Samaritans.
Oh, yeah.
So it would have been like the Samaritan Jews that and I think his father was in one of these baptismal sects, which is interesting because as he developed his religion, he actually eschewed water baptism. He preferred the spiritual baptism, the laying on of hands. So imposition of hands. So that kind of came down this way, and so you have kind of a Zoroastrian mythology in some of Mani's writings, but it's not what they call radical dualism in the Zoroastrians, where hypothesize that there's two principles, that eternal principles always warring, because Mani taught that there was a ultimate unity
Mhm.
that then was divided. And then he describes all these wars between the children of darkness and the children of light. You can find that even, it seems like there was a book about Atlantis that talked about that too. But also the Essene writings talk about the fight between the children of darkness and the children of light. So you can see that there's just this kind of archetypal idea that sort of filters into everything there, but with a little redemptive twist as far as Mani is concerned. Yeah. And another thing that I think is so interesting about Mani is that he was open to a lot of other religious leaders of his time. There's even the leader of the Mazdian religion, the Zoroastrians, he gives credence to as a messenger of light. So some of those that he talks about is Moses, Seth, who was very important to the Gnostics, the Sethian Gnostics, was the real child of Eve and Adam, the real child of Eve, and then Zarathustra, which is Zoroaster, and Buddha, and Jesus. And Mani himself called him an apostle of Christ. So he felt that he had been visited by Christ, and that he was an apostle. By Paul, yeah, definitely. And sometimes he was referred to as the Paraclete, the Comforter, come to console the people. And so they had initiations and sacraments. They had priesthood and bishops. They practiced last rites and various festivals commemorating Mani, and purifying initiations given for the elect. They had division between the elect, who were the ones that conducted the rites and taught, and then there were the elect and the hearers. And the elect had a very rigid lifestyle prescribed for them. They were not to eat meat, lots of dietary restrictions. I think they needed to be celibate. And it's very very hard to be one of the elect. And, although I was reading some lately and they had some exceptions, which I thought were really nice. So like, the elderly could have, meat broth to help sustain themselves and, get rid of the ill, the sick.
The exceptions to fasting, they're not on,
Yeah,
if you're old or sick.
yeah, exactly.
Can I
Exactly.
say
So they have
something?
some, uh-huh,
You said that there were the hearers.
yeah,
There's a part in the service that says be doers of the word and not hearers only.
yes, exactly.
Is that referencing to like this other sort of essential
I
half of the
definitely
message?
think it could. I think that that's a really good insight.
Hmm.
Because I think that's a very good insight. And that's what I find so amazing about this, is that you can find layers of meaning and all of this. And I really do think it's inviting people to not just be hearers, but to actually go and experience these things for themselves and so, yeah, definitely. I was thinking of actually even adding a word, be knowers and doers of the word and not hearers only. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So.
Knowers,
Yeah,
not
in
believers.
a way, it's an invitation for all of us to become an elect in their own. And be elected in their own way. Yeah.
But the way the Monarchians had it set up, they had to have a support community.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cause it was just too strict of a
It
lifestyle,
was,
yeah.
yeah, and it was monastic, so the Manichaean elect lived together, and they were supported by the community, the hearers, and they would bring them the food that they could eat and whatever else was needed to sustain the community there. And then they would do all the blessings and all of that. You know.
Wasn't one of the main church fathers was originally a Manichaean, yeah.
Oh,
Hippolytus.
yes. Let's see, there's St. Thomas Aquinas and.
Yeah, not him, but
St.
similar.
Anthony? No,
I wanna say, it with an H.
well, he,
I mean, would you say?
One of the early church fathers
Of
converted
Hippo.
from Manichaean.
yeah, he was the really early one.
And brought
St.
him-
Augustine of
That's what-
Hippo.
Yes, yeah.
Augustine
Yes.
Augustine of Hippo.
And he brought
Yes.
a lot of their ideas with.
Yeah, he actually, he brought a lot of their ideas, even though when later he described them as terrible, but anyway, he spoke against them, but, you know. I think he said that one of their, members tried to seduce him or something, I don't know. And I didn't really spend the time to read about that part, yeah.
Wondering what was physically or spiritually.
So, anyway, Manichaeanism spread all over the world. It was in China, Persia, India, spread to Rome and Bulgaria. The Bishop Bogomil, which means lover of God, started the Bogomil
Okay.
sect in Bulgaria. And St. Augustine was a former Manichaean, as I said. And then it died out around 800 probably. But well, actually it didn't, because it was the Bogomil bishops that brought that stream to the Cathars in France, southern France. Basically, Bogomil bishops came over and preached and consecrated members of the community there to be. Now that sort of resurgence of the Manichaean tradition was done, well, the primary sacrament was the consolamentum, which basically was liberated your soul from all the attachments of this earthly plane and made you pure or perfect. See, Cathar means pure ones, and so that was their name. And so they had a way of passing on this consolamentum, so that when you received it, then you were then you could also become one of what's called the in French parfait, which means perfect. So that relates back to it is by this means that the perfect conceive. So it's like it's very much a spiritual transmission in that way. And it died out as a religion with the massacre of the Cathars in 1244. Although there were several earlier crusade against them between the Pope Innocent, anything but innocent, and the King of France at the time. I think it, yeah,
1234, there was a lot going on in 1234.
1244, yeah. Yeah,
Like,
so, but even, Stefan said that one of his, I think his first wife, had, that her parents claimed to be Cathar. And they said, well, we're Cathars and we're Cathars at home, and then out in the world, we're Roman Catholic, you know? Yeah, so, it was basically kind of a hidden family tradition carried on through families, privately.
there's some of the big Italian families, Cathars, and they kept that alive too.
Oh, definitely,
Yeah.
particularly northern Italy, and
the
Mike
Scanzi
Howard.
and all of them.
yeah,
Yeah.
Mike Howard gave a really wonderful lecture about Romeo and Juliet. It talks about the Montagues and the Capulets.
Mhm.
And if you look at the story, you can see that the Capulets were very Roman Catholic. The Montagues were not. And then I think it's Friar Lawrence was the friar that married them. But he was, you know, into herbalism and all the things that the Cathars were into. And so it's very likely he was secretly a Cathar working within the Roman Catholic. So yeah, definitely there were family traditions of the Cathars in Italy. And I think that's also where northern Italy and parts of Spain and southern France, I think that's where the Mary Magdalene
She settled down.
succession remained too. Yeah.
You're making me think, when you mentioned the large Italian families carrying their own spiritual tradition, I was very fascinated by, the spirituality that seems to be contained in, by the mob. Like the traditional, Italian mob has, in my opinion, a very unique, like, subset of their traditions, and that really fascinated me.
These families still exist and are part of the mob. Like the Visconti and the,
Oh yeah, Visconti Sforza, Visconti Sforza.
yeah, I'm struggling to say the names right now.
Oh yeah.
And we're some of the first people to have tarot decks painted
Uh-huh.
that we have
Oh,
copies of.
Exactly, yeah, that, because they were,
Designed specifically for divination or part of the Tarocchi playing card set?
they were probably meant to be commemoration of
I'm really.
either royal marriages or it's not royal, but noble.
They
No.
may have thought of it.
They thought they were royal. Anyway, marriages, mostly marriages, I think, that they would have these pageants with floats and they would be represented by the different, Taro. Because, actually the word Trump comes from, triumph, which was the parade that they made after they won a war in Roman times. Yeah,
Right? They wanted
yeah,
to read
yeah.
Cleopatra in one of those.
Right,
soldiers'
right, yeah, exactly, yeah, so,
I've been saying memento mori, because that's something that's really fascinated me, and I learned recently that when Roman generals came home and were in parade for their victories, there was a slave behind them who was there to whisper memento mori every once in a while to help remind them of their mortality, of their eventual death, of the fact that they may be victorious today, but that doesn't mean that they are a victor.
right. So anyway, that's kind of, and so, yeah, they did have a card game, that they used, that they played. And the idea of using them for divination, I think was later.
I think so too.
Mhm.
Though I think that, wow, you get into that liminal space between gambling and divination, that's kind of an interesting question.
Yeah.
Yeah, to my knowledge from researching tarot, it was a Tarocchini card playing game
Yeah.
in Italy. And when it migrated to France, they started utilizing them as part of their divination and then started designing decks around
Around that.
divination based.
Yeah, and then, and I think when you get to the Marseille, there's these sort of little occult little inroads in there, and then, of course, when you get to the weight deck, then there's all that, coming into it as well. Uh-huh. Pamela Smith, you should call it the Pamela Smith deck.
I agree with that.
And that whole, I don't know, I've been learning a lot about tarot history a lot, and there's almost always a vessel that channels the language and a vessel that channels the like the written language and the artistic language.
Yeah,
And they're almost never honored together.
right,
I don't know. so-
yeah, exactly. Yep. So then, so now, then, well, so as far as, the Cathars, they kind of died out in 1244, but like I said, they kind of survived and then, so I'm gonna talk a little bit about the Duanel succession, I think, in this part of it. Because, that was, happened, Jules Duanel is a French, I think from a French family. He attended some, and I can't remember her name just off the top of my head, maybe I'll come to it later. But anyway, she was a noble woman in England and held theosophical meetings. And at that particular time, Theosophy was very interested in spiritualism. And so they conducted these seances. And in one of them, some accounts say 2, some 3 Bogomil bishops appeared as apparitions that everyone saw. And they sort of, with their spirit hands, transmitted the revival of the Gnostic Church in France to Duanel, and he consecrated three other bishops. One of them was Pappus, who wrote books on occultism, and I can't remember his given name right now, but Pappus is what most people know him by. And then he consecrated several people that he consecrated other people, and so we call that the spiritual succession, as opposed to the apostolic succession, which comes from the apostle. And then Rosamund was the owner sort of a spiritual succession to Mary Magdalene, the order of Mary Magdalene. So she was my co-consecrant there.
The Order of Mary Magdalene.
Yeah,
When
That's
It was the order that makes me think monastic.
well, I think they were kind of a group of women that, as far as I can tell from how she described it. And she had a little history on her website. I don't know if it's still there since she passed away or not. They took it down or whatever. But anyway, she was a part of that order, and then was given instructions. She said they told her, you cannot go public until you receive a valid apostolic succession. And so
Wait, the
that's
Order of the Spirits or?
the women, that trained her
Okay.
and passed on the hierophantic powers of that part. And she every year on the day of Mary Magdalene, she would give a special blessing to everyone. They'd come up and she'd put her veil over them and give them a blessing, and then the next person. Yeah.
she carried something within her.
Oh, yes.
I don't know, you said the aura, or she had something very special that made her to me, she was a physically beautiful woman.
Oh, yeah.
Even in advanced age,
Yeah.
but this is something very profound.
Oh,
that
yeah.
came through her, divine feminine.
The divine feminine,
Wow.
for sure.
What a
So
remarkable.
powerful, really. Just an amazing woman. And so strong but gentle. I don't know how else to describe it.
Yeah.
This gentle, strong presence is just amazing. Yeah, yeah, she,
I wonder if there's some on the, you know,
I'm gonna look for the sure.
yeah.
when she would come out for the mass service, she always carried, I think it was a cat, wasn't it?
Oh, yeah, she had that temple cat. Uh-huh.
Like Freya.
And it would be set right in the front row.
I think one incarnation was called Isis.
Oh my God, it's covered.
Yeah. So anyway, so that's how this French line comes down, and at a certain point in history, Jean Vercol was a Frenchman. He received he was first given the spiritual succession through the bishops of Bonne-Elzélan. And then, and I can't remember the exact person, but then he was also given the apostolic succession from a bishop for that. So he kind of fused those two as they came down, and Bishop Robert Bokinas, who has since passed away some time ago, he bore that tradition, and Stefan and he exchanged successions. So succession. So Stefan passed that on to me when I was consecrated. So we have the Dwarnell section.
I was reading in the Gnostic Gospels by Pagels that the early Gnostics seem to really reject apostolic succession as a concept. But we seem not to get necessarily rest our hats on it, but definitely to include it.
Yeah.
I was just wondering, thoughts?
Well, I think there's a lot of Gnostic scriptures that criticizes what they call apostolic men. And
It reads like it was a power play in the beginning, like they're saying,
Right.
you guys aren't correct because you don't come from one of these 12 people.
Right. And certainly that was probably leveled against them, Valentinians,
Mhm.
who claim to derive their apostolic succession from Paul. So that was like a spiritual succession because those are physical human beings. It's a physical human being that passed it on to Paul.
Right.
Yeah, the spiritual transmission. So yeah, that's wow.
Where was the Mary Magdalene fall on this, if it is already, so I don't see it.
Well, like I said, this is
It's perfect.
this is imperfect. So, so you can add it where you like. Yeah. Certainly, I mean, Mary Magdalene was very, I think she was an apostle. So,
But then the number 12 too, that's kind of,
uh,
in some places it's 12 and in some places it's hundreds, right?
yeah,
And 44.
which is 12 times 12. Anyway, so yeah, we put Mary Magdalene in there. Certainly the Magdalene tradition to go there. Where?
Gnostic,
So anyway, some of the things that are particularly, I think, interesting about the Cathars is they did have bishops, leaders, perfected, called, so there were the perfect, and then there were what were called, credenti, credant, the believers. So the believers, sort of the believers and the knowers. And so, the Cathars also had a particular diet that they observed. They believed that they would not eat anything that they thought was generated by sexual intercourse. So that
Oh.
was, but they believed that fish were generated from the mud and the silt in the water.
Yeah, lucky
So-
for them, Darwin
so-
was later.
So they eat fish, but they wouldn't eat cheese or, so very much, you can see very much an overlay of a Manichaean.
Mhm.
But what I think is really interesting is that both men and women were equally leaders. And in fact, Esther Montefort was one of the great leaders of Catholic religion, and she was sometimes called the dove of the Holy Spirit. So women had a much higher place in the Catholic religion than in mainstream Roman Catholicism or Orthodox.
Steve, are we
Uh-huh.
talking 1200 now?
Yes. Mhm.
Funny how all these religious groups keep popping up and saying, hey, turns out women are equal.
Yeah. So anyway, so now, I just wanted to talk a little bit about the Dwamel succession when we were talking about,
How do you spell Dwamel?
Dwamel is, Doinel.
Okay, I never would have got that on.
Right. Yeah, it's the French. I've been learning French for my trip to France, so.
Say something like, je m'appelle Stephen.
My favorite language by the sound. Just love the sound.
Yes,
I
I
would go
do
sometimes to
too.
French movies, you know, when I lived in LA.
Yeah. It sounds so romantic.
Yeah.
Anyway, so now we'll go on to the Mandeans. Here, I talked a little bit about them already. They were baptismal community. You can see both Essene and Zoroastrian influences. Their sacred language was Aramaic, so obviously, and of course with the Syrian tradition, the Odes of Solomon were translated from Old Syriac. So, and those are sort of Judaic stream, Essene-like Jews there. So, baptismal sects of that nature. So that's what we have developing in the Mandean is basically their main sacrament was water baptism. And they actually did it in rivers, and they had little huts, houses built over the running water that they would go into, huge places where people could gather. And because these were community events, and all these complex prayers that they had to memorize, it was pretty amazing. It's very complex and really difficult to learn. And so,
The Mandeans still exist though, don't they?
yes, they do, but since what was his name? The guy in Iraq that Saddam Hussein, followed Saddam Hussein, the ruling sects of Islam, just went in and just wiped out. They had to flee, so they were made refugees. And I think there's a group in Canada and somewhere else in the USA. They are, they're very proud of their heritage, and so they really don't want outsiders coming in and trying to learn their stuff. But on the other hand, the young Mandeans don't have much use for it anymore. So it's kind of it's not doing as well as it could in that regard. But if it's meant to last, it will. But anyway, that was kind of sad that happened. Yeah. So it's pretty much the only continuously practiced Gnostic tradition that survived to modern times.
Well, what about the Hermetics? Maybe?
Now we're going to go to the Hermetics, the Hermetic tradition. This is what I call sort of the underground stream of Gnosis, and the Hermetic tradition here. It had, well, it probably doesn't have an unbroken practice, tradition of practice.
Right, sneaking Grimoires out of the Byzantine Empire probably doesn't count as an unbroken practice.
No. So, right. Yeah. So anyway, it was it sort of came from that Alexandrian melting pot of spiritual traditions. You can see there's a little bit of influence from Christian Gnosticism, although they don't talk about Jesus, but they have a mystery figure called Hermes Trismegistus, which means Hermes the thrice greatest. And in several of the writings is obviously also thought. And so a lot of the Hermetic writings are sort of dialogues between the gods and the person being dictated to.
So much clear cognizance.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Definitely. There's a lot of that, and it was basically an adaptation of the Gnostic stream and mystery religions to a non-Christian, non-Jewish community. So it was,
They say to a non-Christian, non-Jewish community, it feels like these are all adaptations to different communities, and Jewish Commissioner was one of them.
exactly, yeah, right. So
Right.
this was an adaptation to a particular, because there's all this, early, Middle Platonism and Neoplatonism and both the Gnostic and the Hermetic and Sufi and all of these kind of, but it's in some ways it all goes back to that early ascensional mysticism of these super shamans rising up through all these planes of consciousness and coming back and sharing their notes and writing books and so
Right.
they had these like super high experiences, and I think that's a lot of reason why the Gnostic scriptures are so topsy-turvy, is that they have these incredible experiences of this unitary consciousness, and then trying to come back and kind of work it into the existing mythology.
No,
Uh,
guys, not like that. Not like that either.
It's pretty.
But if you take that and that, then maybe we could, no, not like that either.
Exactly. So that's why Stefan has said that, we can't really rely on the Sethian revisions of the book of Genesis so much, because it kind of distorts somehow in trying to adapt it to that demiurgic story, subtly warps the.
It's a bit of a forced fit.
Yeah, it distorts it to it distorts the purity of the Gnostic.
I'm just remembering one thing, I'll make it very short.
Uh-huh,
In going back to Alexandria, we have the Jewish tradition, all
Yeah.
these different things.
yeah,
Also, at least I have read, and I don't know,
oh, yeah,
know that you have to be a scholar, but that also there was influence from India.
oh,
So we have the
yes.
East
So,
coming
yes.
in here,
Oh,
ideas,
definitely.
as you say, going up to the top of the mountain.
Yeah, so that, I should have put that into because the Syrian is the Far East, in that regard. But, also Alexandria, because one of the teachers of Alexander the Great, his name is Alexandria, was from India. So, yeah.
Something I learned about that time frame is that a lot of manpower was getting shipped out of India. And that it was for construction as well as for scholarly purposes, and that most of those were walking. And that once they got where they were going, they never went back.
There was trade too, between southern India.
Oh, yes. And that's also, India was still is a major center of the Theosophical Society.
Well, the Vedas, some of the most ancient of the great high awareness.
This is the point where Larry converts all of us to Buddhism and the church just dies.
Right. Yeah, well, Buddha was one of the messengers of light listed by Manu. Yeah, and there's a lot of Buddhists, the Manichaean, actually, there was a lot of cross-fertilization between Mani and the Alexandrians, and also between Mani and the Buddhists. In fact, before Mani, Buddhism was not monastic. It was Manichaean lifestyle that introduced monasticism to the Buddhists.
Oh, why?
Because I feel because Buddha, I don't think Buddha intended for himself to be seen as a god. That's what he preached and practiced, and
Right.
I think it's.
Oh,
really
I think I
unfortunate
the
that-
monasticism. It's like, Buddhist monks are awesome.
Oh, I took that to mean like the kind of making it a bit more monotheistic.
No, the
I guess I
Buddhist,
misunderstood.
at least the Vajrayana Buddhism that I've learned and the Tibetan Buddhism, they have plethora of deities.
Certainly, it sounded like,
Yeah.
to me, when you said that,
Mhm.
what it sounded like was that before Mani's influence,
Mhm.
it had been more, multi-theistic, and that he
Oh,
made it sort of.
no,
I
it was
misunderstood.
just the living in a community
Mm.
and that way. The old Nyingma, actually, they didn't live in a monastery. They lived in their own houses and people came to them for ritual or they went somewhere else for ritual and, they didn't live in a community.
Yeah. I don't.
Yeah, and then the Kagyu and Satyas
The biblical story of Jesus meditating for 40 days and being tempted by various demons too, and the incredible similarity of that to the story of the
oh,
Buddha.
definitely.
It makes, you had mentioned the possibility, like maybe they're tapping into this common archetype. But I don't disagree with that, but I wonder too, if maybe that was even a nod to the Buddhists, like that was the early Christians' way of saying, Jesus is equivalent to the Buddha, because he did the same things.
Yeah.
Like there's a
Yeah.
lot of, and like, I mean, even out of respect, like, yes,
Yeah.
your great tradition, we acknowledge your great tradition and ours.
Yeah.
I just wondered if there's some sort of commonality about when you reach a certain level of alignment, demons just show up and go and try and. talk you out
Right.
of it.
Day 40, all right.
Yeah.
This guy.
Yeah, so again, these things aren't just those few individuals. They're part of our reality too.
I think we need, for science, we need to support Quentin meditating for 40 days and see what happens.
Let's get a Kickstarter going.
So
Sorry.
anyway, so the Hermetic tradition, what scholars believe they did was they had like 3 levels of participation in the Hermetic mysteries. And the first was kind of public lectures that everyone could come to. And then the second level was a small group that would share ritual and hymns and such together and more intense study. And then there was like a disciple master interaction where something was transmitted beyond the didactic learning that was done one-on-one, more or less. And that prepared that person then to have the insights that would give them the experiences to be able to then teach others and pass on the Hermetic.
Steve, I have 5 minutes. If there's anything I have to know.
I think I don't think so. Anyway, what I could do maybe is if I can find my original file of this, I could just print it out for people that would like it.
Well, and I'm
But I
recording,
haven't
so I
been
can
able
always
to
send you
find
a
it.
recording of the whole thing.
Haven't been able to find it. So anyway, so it survived as a literary tradition. It probably passed out of practice around 400 CE with the destruction of the mystery schools in Alexandria. And then the Hermetic writings were preserved in Persian and Arabic culture of the Byzantine Empire. And book traders in Byzantium sold to wealthy intellectual elite in Italy, like the Medicis.
That was the other name I was trying to think of.
Yeah.
Medicis.
And then resurfaced again in France and Italy during the Crusades. The Templars brought that writings as well from the Byzantine Empire. And then these writings were, let's see, think they were translated by Pico de Vandala, although he wrote a lot of commentaries and really codified the, Hermetic. He was trying to trying to align the Hermetic teachings with the Roman Catechism, basically, kind of. But he was considered heretical, of course. We're trying to do that, but it was. I should remember his name, but I don't. Who translated the Hermetic writings? Anyway, the Cosmo de Medici, I think, was the one that was hiring him to make all these, and he was working on a tract from Plato, and when this came across, he said, "Oh no, stop that! Do this first," you know. So he knew it was important when he heard about Hermes Trismegistus in it. Yeah. So
Hold the phone, focus on that.
yeah, exactly. So I wish I could remember his name. I should have it in here. But I don't. Anyway, so anyway,
It's not
it,
Mirandola.
so it fed into the Freemasonic, Rosicrucian, and alchemical traditions, flowered in Theosophy and the Western magical traditions, carried the message of classical Gnosticism. So we have this sort of esoteric message of Gnosticism, the gnosis, passed on through this literary tradition, and so carried the message of classical Gnosticism forward. So in a sense, the message of Valentinian Gnosticism survived in the Hermetic writings, and the outer form of sacramental practice survived in the mainstream Catholic Church. And there have been repeated attempts to bring the message and sacramental practice together, which kind of ties into a comment that you made earlier, Mercedes, about how they were honored together, the message and the practice. And repeated attempts to bring the message and sacramental practice together. I already talked about Pico de Vandala trying to harmonize those Catholic theology and Hermeticism. The Cistercian order was noted for its contributions to the tradition of alchemy. Various bishops and clerics have been students of ceremonial magic, and most
Giordano
attempts
Bruno.
branded, Giordano Bruno for one, and most attempts branded as heresy by the official church. And then I have enough of, there's a whole bunch of material here on the mainstream Catholic Church, which I think I'll skip over. So now I think what's important is that there was a movement called the Independent Catholic Churches, and how these relate to the Gnostic revivals of the current era. So what Independent Catholic means is that there was a schism, and that they broke away from the Roman Catholic Church and established their own liturgies and their language and such. So they were pretty much followed along traditional. It's just that they weren't tied to the papacy. So I mean so there was a degree that they could assimilate the Gnostic tradition because the Roman Catholic and Orthodox religions have always been kind of an antipathy to the Gnostic view of things.
About what time like when was this happening?
Yeah, I'll get to it. There were several at different times in history. There's like three main ones, and I think we can take this down now. Somebody help me put this down.
What is that, the tradition of that? It's like a recovery. Is my hypothesis. What is the balance?
There we go.
I can't say father quite like these things.
Not yet. One more month.
Have a good week, Larry. Thank you. Alrighty, thank you, Sue. Thank you.
What's ever good at them? I know what it is, but not in words. Which is not helpful.
Even when he was talking about how there was that practice that moved away from water baptism onto spiritual baptism, and that there are multiple types of baptism.
Yeah, that's not something I've read up on, so.
What is baptism, the baptism tradition? What is baptism?
Well, traditionally, it's like a ritual water purification, baptism. And we'll be talking about that. I don't think we'll get to it today. But I wanted to talk a little bit about the independent Catholic churches. When I have to wrap this up, I didn't get nearly as much presented as I had hoped. But anyway, it'll work. So the independent Catholic churches, there are three main independent Catholic branches. There are a number of them, but these are the main ones that come down to us. The Gnostic revivals, and both the French line and the English line. Churches. So I originally gave them names of individuals, but I've since decided that that's not really correct. So
a working model.
Matthew succession, Parent succession, and Philip succession. I don't think
Okay.
don't think that that's some rigid division. It's just that the way it seemed to be organized. I think perhaps it's better to talk about the Dutch Old Catholic, because that's when it broke away from the Roman Catholic Church. So that's when it became independent. This is the Syrian Monophysite church, and so that's when that. And I'll give you the dates in a little bit. And then the South Indian Church. Now, both of these were in India near Adyar, near the Theosophical Center of India. So the Theosophical Society had a whole lot to do with getting these cultures together.
Theosophies look like all religions are the same.
Yeah,
I mean, I think to oversimplify, but the theosophy is all religions are the same, and we learn from all of them.
that's right. Yes, yes. And you can learn from all of them. So that's why that came into this. So the Dutch Old Catholic succession. There was a Roman Catholic community in Poland. It was caught in the political struggles of the Dutch government with the papacy in Rome. And so Rome was continually denying requests for a resident bishop to have a resident bishop in their community. And it was not because the people were bad, it's because the papacy disagreed with their political leaders. But then a French bishop called Barlet, Barlet, he was suspended in Rome but settled in Amsterdam. And he agreed in 1724, the community persuaded him to consecrate one of their leaders by the name of Cornelius von Steenhoven. This was without papal sanction, of course, and so the whole group was consequently excommunicated. So basically, the old Catholic Church, the Dutch Old Catholic Church, was born from an excommunication. And so they were traditionally Catholic. They really didn't change anything, but they were independent of Rome. They initially celebrated the Eucharist in Latin, which was the form at the time, but eventually in the vernacular Dutch. And then we have a bishop of the Dutch Old Catholic Church, Gerardus Roel, last name G-U-L, Gerard. I guess that would be more of the French pronunciation. Gerardus Roel. The Dutch Old Catholic Church consecrated Arnold Paris Matthew, who started the Old Catholic Church in England. They celebrated the Roman liturgy in English, did not require celibacy. He was married. The hitch is, at the time of consecration, Old Catholic Church required priests to be celibate, and he wasn't, and he didn't tell them. And so when they found out Matthew was married, they disavowed Matthew and all his succession. So our history is all this, disavow. Yeah.
My wife is in the audience.
And then in I shouldn't have this full name in here. I think it's Ingall Wedgwood, was consecrated in 1916 by Matthew. And Wedgwood, what happened is, I think initially Matthew's church welcomed Theosophists and Rosicrucians and other esoteric, and then all of a sudden Matthew's like, oh no, we need to be totally orthodox here, and you don't want all these esoteric influences. And so he kind of reluctantly, but I'm glad he did, I guess, consecrated Wedgwood as a bishop so that he could have a church for all the Theosophists. Wedgwood was a Theosophist, and several other people there were Theosophists. So they all got together and formed their own church, which was called the Liberal Catholic Church. And Wedgwood was joined by Charles Leadbeater, who was a Theosophist and a former Anglican priest in England. And what they did was kind of, it almost seems to me, almost channeled, but they made this really beautiful revision and translation of the Latin Tridentine into English. And really beautiful. And they took out all of the, I'm a miserable sinner, and don't kill me, and don't send me to hell, please. All that kind of language out of the mass and the liturgy. And they did a few things that we don't do. But one of the big things about it was there were no barriers of race, creed, or status to participation. However, they did not ordain women. The Roman Catholic Church would not ordain women, and they didn't believe in having alcohol, so they used grape juice instead of wine. And also they discontinued the observance of Ash Wednesday. Leadbeater thought, didn't think it was, had too many negative connotations, but from a Gnostic point of view, it's kind of almost initiatory, you know, it's like kind of commemorates the Jesus, the seal of the Virgin of Light on the
I've heard
So-
reference to, when I was researching Ash Wednesday and like what the controversy was, something was referencing how there's some quote, I think attributed to Jesus about like, don't be like the ones who wear the ashes on their cheeks. And so
Yeah,
we're equating that to like having issue with observing Ash Wednesday because you're actively donning yourself with ashes and thus like being too overt about your spirituality and like bragging
Yeah.
about it and
right,
That's the thing,
yeah,
You don't
yeah,
wear a rosary, you don't wear crosses, all of that, because you don't advertise with piety.
right, yeah, that's part of it too, yeah, definitely. And so, so that's how the liberal Catholic Church, got started. And so James Wedgwood there, he was from the same, family as the Wedgwood China. And
Oh.
so that was his family background. And, so he and Leadbeater started the little Catholic Church, and then there's several other bishops in between. And, Herman Spruitt, started the Church of Antioch.
Not in Antioch, though.
No, Church of Antioch, it was in, San Jose, California, actually. Yeah, yeah. And, he was instrumental in not only getting me in touch with Stefan, but also Rosamund. He was the one that introduced Rosamund to Stefan. So, he was very instrumental, in that way. So,
when we jumped a bit in time, then it sounds like,
yeah.
was this in 18 or 19?
Well,
Guess how old Father Stephen is.
Church of Antioch.
Which one could have
So-
so
In the 1800s.
Antioch probably got started in the late sixties, probably.
Oh, it's different.
Yeah. Urban school.
You said probably in the 60s.
I believe so. I think it started in the sixties. I know that, I talked to people who were, studying and I think priests in the Church of Antioch here in Portland.
I didn't process the jump from the liberal Catholic to the Church of Antioch in that case. So when was the liberal Catholic split?
The liberal Catholic split was with him. You know, they split from that, the whole English Old Catholic Church.
That sounded like it was like.
Because this guy didn't want to have the Theosophists and Rosicrucians and esoteric Christians in his church.
The Rosicrucians, that have to be at least the 1700s.
Yeah,
I don't know.
well, but there are a lot of, Rosicrucian groups that got started, in the late 1800s.
She was just trying to date it.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Yeah, well, James Wedgwood would have been, you know, yeah, probably late 1800s. 1880, 1890, something like that.
It sounded more modern in that way.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, he was part of that whole, you know, Blavatsky and
Spiritualists and all that.
the spiritualists and, the people, who started the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn and G.R.S. Mead and all those people. Sort of that milieu of intellectual and that did this. So, now we're going on to this section here. And, that, was with the South Indian Church. And they officially split from Rome in 1888. And they claim to have been established by Saint Thomas the Apostle. So that's called the Saint Thomas Christians. And in 1892, Mar Julius of the Independent Catholic Church of Ceylon consecrated Joseph Rene Vivat there. And he came to Canada and started an American branch, which came down to through several bishops, eventually to Bishop Wadley, who ordained Stephan to the priesthood. So that's why that branch is important. And the French branch came through several bishops to Monsignor Journal, who then consecrated Jean Breton, the Universal Gnostic Church. So this is really when the French branch became Gnostic. And I don't have the Joannel drawn in here, but he was the one that kind of brought those two together. Started the Universal Gnostic Church, which was like the Universal Mystique. Église Universal Mystique.
Does that have any connotation with the Unitarian Universalists?
No,
They just both chose universal instead of.
they,
It's a different heresy. Is that like
Yeah.
a wider? Is there multiple traditions that do that, or are those just kind of two?
that was, actually, this is kind of, a revision of the word Catholic, because Catholic means universal.
Huh.
And so we decided to make it, universal instead of Catholic.
Jesus says a couple of times the mark of his church is that it'll be universal.
Yeah,
So that's always a throwback to that, like we're the one true church that's universal.
I hear universal as coded language or one verse or one song or one love or one life. So
Well, that's what it means
yeah,
in Latin.
that we are like, well, for me, it's like a connotation of the pleroma, of the oneness, of
exactly.
Yeah.
of the everything
Yes,
that we are and
that
of
is
not.
that would be the Gnostic, interpretation of that, it, to say that you're gonna pick one little manifestation and say, well, this is the whole, is a blasphemy as far as I'm concerned, you know?
Yeah.
You know, the whole is so much greater than any of its little, you know, so they're all universal in that. Yeah,
Although, as far as
So,
the
yeah.
Unitarian Universalists, they share the same branch off the same tree as the Unity does. Yeah,
Unity Church, yeah.
because the folks who founded Unity and the folks who founded the Unitarian Universalists have the same teacher.
Yeah,
I'm not familiar with Unity Church.
They don't believe in the Trinity. That's why they're
Right.
Unitarians.
yes, yes,
And that's a different heresy than us.
right.
Yeah.
And I mean, in that case, then Islam is Unitarian.
Yeah. Depending on where you stand, everyone else is a heretic.
Exactly, exactly. So anyway, so that was the first openly Gnostic, was that, and then he consecrated François Chaudieu, who was martyred, and Vichy government of France came and shot him outside of his door into his house, yeah. And so,
Why?
because they didn't, they thought he was
I mean, I realize they were going to make
Political.
conflicts towards the end.
he was a political nuisance or something, I don't know.
Good for him.
Yeah,
I mean, that's terrible, but
right. Well,
maybe a
anyway.
political government to reach.
Well, there was kind of a backlash against all esoteric groups at that time. everybody was being persecuted. He was no exception. So anyway, so Jean Brecon was consecrated in 1913 by Jerome of the Nazi session and started in the Église Mystique in Versailles, seated by Constance Chinon. Tau took the name of Tau Harmonius as his harmonious.
What is this?
Tau means cross, which is a sort of a title for a bishop.
Okay,
So Tau Stephanus, Tau Harmonius.
okay,
And the Orthodox title is Mar. So you'll hear that, Mar Bedrose.
mhm, okay.
Yeah, yeah. And yeah, so the Vichy government had suppressed the church, all the churches in that regard, but especially the esoteric ones, because they were more, more dangerous. And so that's and then we talked about the American Catholic Church was the one that Noel Wadley was in. And so that was a branch off of this succession here. And at the time, they were very esoteric. After Wadley passed away, they were Orthodox. But, at the time, and in fact, there was a Wadley Mass that Archbishop Spruitt would occasionally do, which was the Liberal Catholic Church liturgy, reorganized upon a Kabbalistic model that Wadley thought that the spheres of the tree of life
That might be fun.
as an order for it. So far, I didn't hear anybody rave about. But anyway, just to give an example that there was some esoteric stream from that angle during the time that Stephan was there in that church. And then we have the Syrian Monophysite Church, also called the Jacobites. They claim to be independent of Rome from the 10th century or maybe earlier. But in Baghdad, in 1866, Jules Ferret, a lapsed Roman Catholic priest, was consecrated Mar Bedros with the sanction of the Patriarch of Antioch. So this is one of those where actually the Patriarch was sanctioned the action. And then a man who was might have been a medical doctor, Dr. W.B. Crow, was consecrated Mar Jacobus in this succession. And he also was named Mar Bernard, Bishop of Santa Sophia. He founded the Order of Holy Wisdom. Adapted traditional Catholic sacraments for those of Theosophic, Hermetic, and Rosicrucian orientation. In 1943, he was elected to the Patriarchal See of Antioch under the title of Basilius Ambula III. He started the ancient Orthodox Catholic Church. So that's right there, ancient Orthodox Catholic Church. And he was the consecrator of Mar Georgius. And Mar Georgius went all over collecting what we call conditional consecrations. So basically collecting apostolic successions from all these other independent Catholic bishops from all these different lines. And there's like 21 of them that funnel down into our succession. And his idea was twofold, not that they really all of them panned out, but the first was that he wanted to make sure that he had at least one valid succession that went back to the apostles. And the other was that he wanted universal succession so that all these different communities could work together. You say, oh, okay, well, we all have the same succession, let's work together. So he called that the ecumenical succession. And so, so that's
What does ecumenical mean?
ecumenical. Well, I have an idea what it means, but I'm not sure if I can.
It's a slippery word.
Yeah,
Accumulated.
ecumenical. I'll have to look into the exact definition, but from what I understand, it's means ecumenizing means bringing different traditions together. Mhm.
If that's what it means.
Yeah, or the basis for them to work together.
How would that make it different from it wasn't
Yeah, so that's,
Theosophist? Is Theosophist and Theosophical together?
yeah, I'm just.
Yeah.
pronouncing it Slightly differently.
Excellent, okay.
The Theosophists are pretty much members of the Theosophical Society. Although there were about three different, or a couple of little split offs from the main Theosophical Society at certain points in history. But I believe that all of them have come back to one Theosophical Society of America.
Okay.
So
I think the difference is the Theosophists are more philosophers and the ecumenicalists are Christians.
yeah, I think that would be good because I've been giving to ecumenical ministries of Oregon because I think that in my mind it makes us more of a legitimate church if we have a membership with that group.
Sure.
So and that means that all different religions are welcome to be part of that. Yeah, it's non-denominational.
I think showing up and being part of the larger community is good.
Yeah. So anyway, so he was consecrated in 1944, Mark Georges, and then we went around and got all these successions. And at the time, and then now we come to Ronald Cowell, who took the name Richard Duke de Palatine when he was consecrated a bishop. He originated as a priest in the Liberal Catholic Church. I believe it originated in Australia, and then was consecrated by Mark Georges in 1953.
Why do you have his dead name on the map?
Why do I have his? I don't
Ronald
know.
Cowell.
I don't know. I should have put Richard Duke de Palatine on there. Like I said, there's a lot of revisions that need to be made here. But anyway, that's because we often talk about the Duke de Palatine Gnostic succession. So anyway, he started the pre-Nicene Gnostic Church. And at the time, Mark Georges carried 10 lines of succession, which included Roman Catholic, Old Catholic, Dutch Old Catholic or English Old Catholic, Armenian Uniate. Now, Uniate means that they were a Orthodox church that got sort of union status with the Roman Catholic Church.
Okay.
Usually, they could have their own rituals. They could do whatever rules they had around marriage and all that other stuff. They could do as they had always done.
I got grandfathered
The
in.
only change was that they had to add like a prayer to the Pope or something,
It's fine to say you like the Pope.
Yeah. And so then those were the Uniate churches. And then there was Syrian Antiochian, Syrian Malabar, Syro-Chaldean, Syrian Gallican, Chaldean, Lineage and Coptic Orthodox, so that is the Egyptian, yeah. Orthodox.
Yeah, everybody.
Yeah, yeah. So he started the pre-Nicene Gnostic Church. He used the short form of the Liberal Catholic Church liturgy, which was, they have the longer form, which follows with some revisions, the old Tridentine rite of the Roman Catholic Church. In fact, if you get a copy of the Science of the Sacraments by Charles Leadbeater, they have the Roman Catholic words on this side and the Roman Catholic Church words on the other. Science of the Sacraments.
Why does consecration so often come with a renaming tradition? And does it always?
What was the
And
question?
can we pick new names?
New names for,
So with the consecration,
uh-huh,
it seems to come along with a renaming tradition.
renaming.
They have
Oh,
each
you
chose
mean
their own name.
consecrate as a bishop?
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah, he kind of changed, kind of, like, Bishop Robert Colquinus took Harmonius as his,
Mhm.
Harmonius the second, because it was already Harmonius. Stefan and my feelings were just, Latinize our names as they are, instead of picking new names, but it's fine if people wanna have a figure that's particularly important to us. I mean, Stefan could have been Tau Valentinus, because one of his names is actually, one of his middle names is Valentine.
Oh,
The V stands for Valentine.
Oh, that's
Uh-huh.
cool.
Yeah, yeah. So,
Wonder if his
but,
mother knew.
anyway, I think he would actually, Richard Duke the Palatine was the one that kind of said, oh, your episcopal name is Stephanus, and so he took it. And then Stephan, before he consecrated me, said, it would really be nice if you would take the name of Stephanus, and I said, I'd be honored too, so.
So do you have a dead name as well?
A dead name?
Sorry, that's a tradition that comes from the LGBT community and
Oh.
that I really believe in and believe before it was associated with the trans community. But it's the idea that when you identify yourself to the world, you use your own name, and that the name of the past that you were born with is it's rude and improper to use that for the new person that you are. And like,
I see.
when I was in college, I had a friend who, his birth name was Christian,
Uh-huh.
but one of the names that he was considered being born as was Hugo, and he identified with that, and I was like, why don't you introduce yourself as Hugo? And he was like, you can do that? I was like, it's your name, you're introducing
Right,
yourself.
exactly, you can be whatever name you want. Anyway, yeah, so, well, I consider it a different name. I mean, it's my spiritual name. Stephanus.
But was your birth name distinctly different?
Spelled different,
Okay.
cause my name at birth was Stephen with a V, which is of Anglo-Saxon origin rather than Greek.
Okay.
Oh, I didn't know that. That's with the B versus the B.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think I take some of both. Stephen from the Anglo-Saxon tradition means voice.
Huh.
And then Stephen with a PH is Greek, meaning crown.
Do you have an opinion or something to say?
Do you plan on being consecrated?
Not even a priest yet.
Is that a path that you think that you're on, or is this something you thought about, I guess?
Well, I mean, if I ever were to become a bishop, which is so far in the future, it's like not even worth like seriously thinking about, but basically I would do the same thing, because honestly, I almost named myself Quintus instead of Clinton anyway. So if I were to become a bishop, I'd be just Quintus. So, but again,
So you
so far,
would practice in another rename.
Yeah,
yeah, but it's, I don't view it the same way as I do like my dead name. It's more of like, it's more of a like context specific name, more than like a dead versus. a
that,
alive
that
name.
makes sense to me too, yeah, I think that's how I
Yeah.
feel too.
I mean, it's kind of like, when, Father Joe did his meditations, he had a name he used specifically for when he was doing rituals. It wasn't like that was his new name, it was a name he used specifically for specific ritual.
Now that makes me think of a wizard's secret name.
Yeah, except for, it wasn't, I mean, I guess it wasn't really a secret, because he was mentioned in the ritual with a bunch of us there, but, I mean,
Thank you.
I'm guessing
Sorry,
it'd be something similar.
Name of power.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a name when he talked to the angels about this stuff, basically, they sort of gave him that name for use when talking with them. But that's a separate, but somewhat related, but not really.
So anyway, it was Duke de Palatine who, sort of, taught, Stefan the liturgy, they kind of put it together, the Gnostic, Holy Eucharist that we have today was pretty much, designed by Richard Duke de Palatine. And we used the Liberal Catholic Church liturgy. And with any liturgy would have variable portions, you know, the hymns and such like that. And so what we did was put Gnostic hymns and verses in there. And he came up with the original list of 7 saints. He said these were the Gnostic saints. And then Stefan has added to them.
We have a list of saints?
Yeah, I don't know what happened. We had a little monograph that was published it was kind of my ordination thesis, I guess, after the fact, of course. But anyway, it was kind of with that intent. But a lot of people wanted to have some background of the Valentinos, Marcio,
It makes sense that they,
and then Esplanade.
I'd love to read that if you track it
Yeah,
down.
if I can track it down, I will. Yeah.
I would
So-
imagine the list would be the same or similar to the one in the maps, wouldn't it?
But Valentinus doesn't make the one in mass. I think St. Lucy does, but not him.
What?
I think Valentinus is listed in there.
Oh, yeah,
In the
definitely.
Latin mass?
No,
in
no.
our
no,
maps.
Oh, in our mass.
In our maps, yeah, exactly, yeah. Anyway, he came up with that, and also did I say the facing the people? That was Duke de Palatine who came up with that long before the Roman Catholic Church thought of it. And,
Facing the people?
where the celebrant is behind the altar, facing the people, rather than the altar against the wall, and people pretty much seeing the back of the celebrant most of the time.
Yeah, I mean, every time I went to church as a kid, it was always facing the people. Yes. So that was, you're saying that was, Palatine,
Yeah,
General
he
Palpatine.
started
That's
before
what I
before the Roman Catholic Church started doing that, he was doing.
That would make sense because
Yeah.
the dates are giving us
He-
right
he
before
said-
the Second
He
Vatican.
said he had I think Richard said he had or Ronald, said he had a vision of how the Gnostics celebrated the Eucharist, and that's what he saw.
I think he's right.
Yeah. So,
Pretty sure that's how Christ is reported
Yeah.
to have celebrated the first.
Well, if you look at the
Facing
painting,
his people.
they're sitting at a table.
Oh, at the table.
I can
Not
see
facing
these-
anybody.
These things happen
Face to
very,
face with
these things happen very quickly, I can see, because, Stefan was consecrated by Richard Duke de Palatine in, April of 1967.
Wait, so Mar George's 1944.
Yeah,
Right before the Nag Hammadi was discovered.
exactly.
Palatine, what was the date you gave for him?
He was, let's see, 1953,
So maybe it's been translated.
yeah. Yeah, yeah,
And then 1967, that's definitely after it's been checked.
yeah, that's when, Stefan was consecrated.
Such an exciting.
So, yes.
How much of it
It was
was
a
being
very,
shared
very
with?
creative time, particularly with, I think that's when all of these Vesper services were written and put together. The Vespers, the Vespers of Sophia and Magdalene, which will be doing later this quarter. And all of those were put together. And it was a very creative, ferment time. Yeah.
Find those books and then maybe like, okay, you guys,
Oh,
look what we
yeah.
got.
And
And
Yeah.
post-war.
And that's always been Stefan's, you said the real utility in the Nag Hammadi is not studying them as much as using them liturgically. It's using them that you get, you get the experiences and rather than, mulling over, oh, they said this bad thing about this or this or that, that's the utility really is in using them liturgically, and liturgy comes from basically the word of the people. It's where we get the word laity, lay server. There's
It makes me think of the statue coming out of the net and going right back into practice.
yeah.
That like
The
these,
beast cut off, yeah.
yeah, that these things aren't intended to be observed, they're intended to be practiced.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. And so, he was the first one in this, sort of line, Stefan, the first one, to ordain and consecrate women. So, he consecrated, Rosamund, I can't remember exactly the date.
Is that a picture of her up on the wall?
Yeah, she's the woman there,
Yeah.
the long hair, certainly. You'll see the three bishops there and the deacon of the mass.
That was, after your, ordination, right? To the
The consecration of
Yes.
episcopate, yeah,
Yes.
that was taken, yeah. October 23rd, 2011. So,
It looks spicy.
oh, she was a firebrand, but so loving and so gentle and liberating. I mean, just amazing energy. Yeah. Amazing. And, and then he added a lot of Gnostic material to the liturgies and rites. He's the one that put together our lectionary. Stefan, masterfully.
What an amazing amount of heavy lifting that he did.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Yeah, he really poured, everything into this, disseminating,
Oh my God, midwife.
the gnosis, the mysteries, yeah, yeah. And then there were several other
Also, it
Gnostic
sounds like a
revival,
lot of curation of what Heather was talking before.
but,
Sorry, it sounds also like a lot of curation, like he curated a lot of what he found before, rather than creating.
yes,
Is that-
yes, and I kind of work that way too, I can, revise things a little, but I not very good at just coming up with something from nothing. So, yeah, so he was very much like that. So he'd find material. A lot of this comes from a lot of the parts in there are from Fragments of a Faith Forgotten by G.R.S. Lee. So at some point I'm in the process of trying to collect all these, oh, well, this came from here and this came from there. Stefan doesn't really want me to do this, but I think it's important to see that these came from somewhere.
Somebody's gonna do it.
And he didn't just make them up.
Right.
He didn't just make it up. And this was historic Gnostic material that he adapted to
It makes me think,
liturgical use.
yeah, it makes me think about the difference between inspiration and plagiarization.
Yeah,
And like
Yeah.
you can, like, all knowledge is inspired, I firmly
Uh-huh.
believe.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I think that it's a very valuable and necessary practice
Uh-huh.
to be able to consume work and then to translate it through your own energy. Even if it comes out incredibly similar, I think
Yeah.
that that's still inspired, still inspiration,
Yeah.
still a unique and new
yeah,
creation, but
Yeah.
a lot of people get like weird about it. I was taught to be weird about it, to kind of like hide and obscure my inspirations and where these initial ideas came from in order to better present them as my own.
Oh my
yeah,
goodness,
yeah,
raises by academics, if it doesn't have a citation, it's not valid.
right.
If you have no new ideas, you don't count, it's like
And-
everything.
And then a side note, you'll probably come across what we call the Johannites. And they begin with Monsignor Noviel. As a constitutional bishop set up by the revolutionary government of France in opposition to the papacy. So that was kind of an independent Catholic movement. And consecrated Bernard Bamba, also known as Teleprat. Teleprat was the Grand Master of the revived Templar order. He was also an esotericist, and after his consecration, became prelate of the Johannite Church of Primitive Christians, which from him then all the people he consecrated other people. So we have I think it's called the apostolic. No, I'm trying to think of the church. I think it's HAGC, Apostolic Johannite Church. And the reason they're called Johannite is because Teleprat wrote an esoteric revision of the Gospel of John.
Okay.
That they used. So, yeah, I don't, but there are people around that probably be able to get you a copy of it. So I'm sure it's not
For the library.
a secret for their for their use only. But anyway, so that's the kind of how they came about. Teleprat was a part of what the salon culture in France at the time, and very artistic fervor, creative. That's so. Then to wrap it up, I have so. Well, basically, it's that people come into the world. Some of them feel Gnostic. They want something more. There's got to be something more to this, And so throughout history, there's this Gnostic yearning for acceptance in the practice of the sacramental life, free from oppressive dogma and religious doctrines. How frustrating Either the church is not accepting of Gnostic teachings, or esoteric organizations antagonistic to the practice of Christian sacramental ritual. A time for making it home. At no other time has it been more possible to bring the gnosis and the sacraments together. The inner gnosis, preserved in the Nag Hammadi texts and the Hermetic tradition, can be wed to the sacramental practice with which it was originally joined. We can bring the inner power of the gnosis and the outer form of sacrament together. We can make the two one. We can make the inner and the outer into a single one, and thus enter the kingdom. So with that, I will conclude our class for this afternoon. And may you all go home with the blessings that we have received.
Thank you.
Thank you.